Ladies and gentlemen,
We line
please
up
rise
for the
for the
anthems.
national anthem of the United States of America.
You can sum up South Africa's relationship with rugby with this clip. New Zealand's with this. If you want to describe the USA's relationship to rugby, you're probably best looking here. I mean, look at it. There's 18 people in that scrum, no backlines, the pitch isn't marked out, there's no technique in the rucking, the tackling's poor, both teams are running backwards, no defensive line set, no depth in the attack, the ball is in one hand at all times, the scrum half's in the scrum, the pitch is too short, the number 8 isn't bound properly, neither team seems to be wearing an actual kit, this guy's off his feet at the breakdown, this guy hasn't come through the gate, no guard is set, half time is blown without the ball going out, and the scrum isn't even reset by a pedantic referee once. But despite this, there's a very pure enthusiasm for the sport, even if it isn't shared by enough people to field a team. Rugby in the United States is a niche sport, kept alive by passionate pockets with ambitions of making it mainstream in a country dominated by the same 4 sports. This didn't have to be the case. Rewind to the 1830s, and rugby stood on the cusp of itself becoming a major American sport. Big on either coast, it was only in the middle of the land of the free that rugby was struggling to compete with the new hybrid sport of American football, a mutant game designed by picking the best bits of numerous British football codes in order to create a game that was culturally American. In the early days, the two games were actually very similar, with players regularly floating between the two codes depending on which was bigger in their town. It wasn't until 1906 that the shoulder pad brigade legalised the forward pass and the two sports started to drift apart like two teenage boys who were best friends until one of them went and got the nose pierced and got really into My Chemical Romance. Contrary to the transatlantic narrative, it wasn't a split on bad terms. The pair simply hit a point where they didn't have much in common anymore. However, before they hit this point, you had a situation in which one sport was trying to expand outwards and the other expand inwards, which was when rugby hit one particular snag: amateurism. Until 1995, it was against the International Rugby Board's code of conduct to pay players actual money for playing rugby. So the athletes who chose rugby had to do it just for pride, fun, and broken bones. America being America, however, what would become the NFL had no such rule. Dollar signs bursting from the eyes from day one. This gave the best players a choice: play rugby for love or play football for money. For the best US rugby players, it was a bit like having a choice between paying to drink Coke or being paid to drink Pepsi. Given the chance to earn money playing a game a lot like the one they loved, the best players on either coast jumped ship to somewhere without ships. The crowds followed, and so, by the turn of the century, rugby was lost to America. The American sports market today is very, very different to that of 100 years ago. A huge commercialised beast with sell-out sponsorship almost as insane as Rugby Warfare's Christmas sale, offering 40% off all goods and free UK delivery for any orders over £50. It's a market that rugby, to a slightly embarrassing degree, is desperate to tap into. Some attempts have been more successful than others, but one-off events like Ireland playing the All Blacks in Chicago and the 7th World Cup have shown that US sport fans are willing to lap rugby up as a small, daytime snack in amongst their main staple diet of balls, basket, base and foot. But if there's one thing we know about Americans, it's that they have an appetite. So this year saw the launch of Major League Rugby, an attempt to create an extra meal in the American day. And whilst the league's first season wasn't exactly a huge nationwide event, we know the US public can't exactly be trusted to make sensible decisions en masse. So instead it's worth looking at the more localised impact that MLR had. The big winners, in more ways than one, were the Seattle Seawolves. Perhaps because they're the only major rugby team in the world named after nuclear submarines, the Seawolves did capture the local public's imagination, consistently selling out games and increasing interest and participation in the area a great deal. Whilst the league might not be able to turn the US into a rugby culture anytime soon, it has the potential to create a few new hotbeds for a sport where getting paid to play is now an option. This slow development is at the heart of what USA Rugby is trying to do. When unveiling its current national team head coach Gary Gold, USA Rugby's Dan Lyle said he made the appointment based more on Gold's ability to coach other coaches than the team itself, that he would have an impact on how the academy and the Major League Rugby teams are taught. But the USA haven't exactly taken a hit for focusing on this development, with 2018 being arguably the USA's best year in rugby since their inexplicable back-to-back Olympic titles in the 20s. This year just gone, the USA won 10 out of 11 games, only losing to top-of-the-world Ireland, and even then scoring 2 more tries against them than the All Blacks managed. This included their first ever victory over Samoa, and a notably huge win over Scotland. Whilst in other pursuits such as baseball or war, the USA beating Scotland wouldn't be a huge deal. In rugby, this is a major upset. Key man in that win was Joe Taufete'e, a man with the leg drive of the piston-powered cow. A junior football player, Taufete'e took up rugby at age 18 in college, making his USA debut just 4 years later in the 2015 World Cup. Since then he's played 90 games for the Eagles and scored 11 tries. Now that isn't just an impressive record for a hooker, it's the best ever. The only two in the two shirt who have ever scored more test tries than Taufete'e are Sean Fitzpatrick and Keith Wood, considered possibly the two greatest in the position of all time. Taufete'e has scored only one try fewer in 19 games than Fitzpatrick managed in 91. The only man who could ever claim to be more important to the Eagles' current success is Glenn Frey, and even then he probably couldn't finish this try against Russia. Elsewhere in the Eagles, we have a number of other key players. We have Blaine Scully, a man who earned the title of Captain America by taking the Steve Rogers route for simply not making mistakes. We have Arj McGinty, one of the few in America who can claim to be Irish and genuinely mean it, a fly-off who runs the game with an efficiency and proficiency rarely found in Tier 2 nations. And we have Samu Manoa, a man who is such a beast I'm hesitant to say he's a man at all. There's also a man in their squad called Sam Wuching. I've got no idea if he's any good, but I'm just delighted by the fact there's a man out there called Sam Wuching. For the first time ever next year, the USA will be heading into a World Cup with the majority of their squad being full-time professionals. Having been drawn in the pool of death with England, Argentina, France and Tonga, it's hard to say whether the USA will be able to compete with 3 consecutive top-tier sides, desperate to squeeze points out of them week on week on week. But you'll be unlikely to see any 60-point blowouts like happened in 2015. The States now a team who will always give you a game. This is probably the strongest the USA have ever looked a year out from a World Cup, and a good showing in Japan could be exactly what World Rugby needs to make their wooing attempts seem a little less embarrassing and a tad more reciprocated. Because though they're unlikely to win the World Cup, you can bet the USA will have the correct number of players in the scrum, solid technique in the ruck, a backline defensive line set, the knowledge you should really run forwards, depth and attack, a number 8 who binds properly, a scrum half who stays out the scrum, and an actual kit, while still thriving off that core, pure enthusiasm for the game from those select few who allowed a sport that ought to have been crushed under the weight of the American market to carry on fighting. Isn't it funny the things you find in your childhood bedroom when you go home for Christmas? Speaking of which, Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching that. I appreciate it. That's part 5 in an ongoing series on all the teams in next year's World Cup, which is very almost this year's World Cup. Speaking of which, on New Year's Eve, I'm going to be doing the first in a series of videos on my team of the year, on the players that impressed me most in this last year. There's going to be a number of those going up over the course of that next week or so. So hopefully keep your eyes out for that. Keep your eyes out for more I'm doing next year. You know, we've got the Six Nations, we've got the World Cup, we've got loads of other things in the middle. We've got 15 more of these videos to go. In the meantime though, I'm going to wish you Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I'm going to do this. Oh no, it was a dummy.